Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Hertz. I'm the Vice Dean of the Law School and a member of the faculty. And it is my great pleasure, I'm delighted to welcome everyone here to the second annual Ivan Meyer Lecture in Jewish Law. The lecture, as you probably know, is under the auspices of the Center for Jewish Law and Contemporary Civilization. Was until recently known as the Center for Jewish Law and Interdisciplinary Studies, but that was too constraining a title for as ambitious an organization as this. Around these halls, though, we don't really think of it in either of those terms. We always just refer to it as Suzanne's program, because the center is, of course, the creation and project of the brilliant, learned, overextended but tireless Suzanne Stone. And I'm sure almost everyone in the room knows Suzanne, and thus will not be surprised to hear that the center, which only was established in 2004, has really made extraordinary strides and turned into a quite astonishing gathering place for scholars and students and professors and fellows and passers through and hangers on and all sorts of folks who are interested in innovative approaches to the study of Jewish law. I should just say that Suzanne could not have done what she has with the center without some assistance, and that has come most particularly from the sterling Ari Mermelstein, who's here tonight, and without whom I fear the whole thing might just come crashing down. But institutionally and on behalf of the law school, I just want to give profound thanks to both Suzanne and Ari. Tonight's talk, though, is made possible more specifically by a wonderfully magnanimous, thoughtful, unsolicited gift in honor of Ivan Meyer. Dr. Ivan Isaac Meyer was a doctor in the sense that he had a German law degree. He was not a medical doctor, but was born in 1901 and passed away in 1999. Practicing as a lawyer first in Germany, and then for obvious reasons fled and moved to New York, where he lived up in Washington Heights and was a generous supporter of Jewish education in this city. Longtime resident of the Washington Heights Jewish community who continued to attend services in Washington Heights even after moving down to the Upper West Side, and a leading benefactor of the Yeshiva, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch in Upper Manhattan. As I say, he passed away in 1999, and the lecture, and I'll say a little more about the accompanying visitorship, was from his estate, and really I'm delighted that one of those who was in large measure responsible for rooting the gift to Cardozo is with us tonight, and that's Barbara Ebenstein, who's sitting here. And Barbara, as an executrix of the estate, and I just want to publicly express our thanks and our appreciation for your support and engagement. Now, the lecture, the Ivan Meyer lecture, is really just the publicly visible piece of something bigger, the Ivan Meyer Visiting Scholar in Comparative Jewish Law. The lecturer holds the position of visiting scholar and spends many weeks here at Cardozo, teaching a class, giving a talk within the law school, meeting with students, engaging in the intellectual life of the law school and the center. And this year it is our tremendous privilege to have with us as the Meyer Visiting Scholar, Professor Aryeh Edrei of the Tel Aviv University Law School. Professor Edrei is, no surprise, a specialist in Jewish law. He has written extensively about the impact of Zionism on the development of halakhah and on Jewish law and the legal profession. He received his LLB, his LLM, and his PhD from the Hebrew University. He's taught at Hebrew University in Tel Aviv, his current appointment in Israel, but also at the University of Toronto, at Cardozo previously, at the Jewish Theological Seminary, at the Hebrew College in Boston, and also spent a year as a fellow at the Center for Jewish Studies at Harvard. While he's here with us now, he's teaching a course entitled Jewish Law in the State of Israel, Law and Ideology. but Aryeh is really much more than a visitor to this law school. He is truly a partner with the law school and the center in particular. In many undertakings, perhaps the most visible is that he and Suzanne are co-editors of a journal called Dinei Israel, which is, I believe, the only such journal of its type co-edited in the United States and Israel. It is one sort of tangible manifestation of as I say, the valued partnership that we have with Professor Edrei. Professor Edrei's topic for this evening is the case of the sabbatical year polemic, Jewish law, nationalism, and reimagining the community. And let me just say two words about that. First of all, as Vice Dean, the sabbatical year polemic has a different meaning for me. And I was very curious to hear what he had to say, and I was going to tie it into halakhic law, and it might have been quite useful in a brass tacks, tangible way. But of course, the sabbatical year in question does not involve the year off for the professor, but the requirement that every seventh year people forego agricultural labor. Which brings me to the second sort of comment. Notice something about this title, which is the different scope, if you will, about what's on either side of the colon, right? We have the case of the sabbatical year polemic. That's pretty specific and narrow and focused. And then we have Jewish law, nationalism, and reimagining the community, which is pretty broad, right? Pretty sweeping. And I think that actually this is quite typical of Professor Edrei's scholarship. That is, that it is characterized by the goal of integrating, on the one hand, a kind of close analysis of legal texts, halakhic texts, and this is here so we can read some texts together tonight, specific legal propositions and texts, but tying those in, integrating them with much larger questions of jurisprudence and ideology. And in that sense, it's an approach that recalls the famous opening of Blake's Auguries of Innocence, to see the world in a grain of sand. And so I hope you will please join me in welcoming the halakhic William Blake, Professor Aryeh Edrei.
Thank you, Michael. Well, this is, as you said, my second visit to Cardozo, and I, to be honest, hoping for the third one. What? I have tremendously enjoyed the atmosphere of the school. I've tremendously enjoyed the students and the atmosphere of the class, and not to talk about the hospitality, both from the school, you, and particularly from Suzanne. So really, thank you very much for this opportunity. Okay. If anyone follows the Israeli deliberation in the past few months, will be aware of the fact that this polemic was on the headlines for a few months, if not more. Quite passionate polemic, deliberation. Supreme Court was involved, the government was involved, not to talk about the entire rabbinic world. The truth is that this polemic is alive for more than a century. It's on the headline, coming up every 7 years, again and again for over a century. It's not easy to find an example in the history of halakhah of a polemic that sustained for such a long time at the headlines and was not resolved. What is it in this controversy? What is it in this polemic that it is so passionate, that it's still alive, that it caused so much energy, hatred, anger, and so on? Well, you know that sabbatical year, shmita, contrary, Michael, to in the academic life, in the agricultural life, sabbatical year is valid only in the land of Israel. So, since it is such a passionate debate, it's part of my life. It's part of my social life, part of my religious life. And for you, as an American audience, it might be a little different. Watching from the side what's going on there. So the interaction between me and the American audience might be interesting. As Michael have said, when I was asked to suggest a topic for my talk, I've suggested a few topics or few titles, which at the end it came out as a combination of the smaller picture, which is not as small as you think, Michael, but the smaller picture and the big picture. And I've suggested actually a few more titles. This was one, Jewish law facing the challenge of Jewish sovereignty. I've suggested from classical orthodoxy to religious Zionism. And I've suggested halakhah, nationalism, and the reimagining of the community. So those three suggestions or titles, they look so much different from each other. How does it get together to something that makes sense? Well, I will try in my talk, and this is the purpose of my talk, to try to put those two topics which seem so different and so far from each other. I'll try to make sense and to put them together and show how they cooperate and how each one is actually, how they come into one, make sense together into one topic. So I will deal with the following issues. The halakhic crisis in the age of Zionism and its implications. I will talk about the revolutionary halakhic approach of Rabbi Kook. I will introduce him in a few minutes, in contrast of the approach of classical orthodoxy. And I will deal with the difference, which is similar to what we have seen, between classical orthodoxy and religious Zionism. And of course, law as definer and creator of communal boundaries. And I will try to reveal my attitude toward all those issues from the details of the halakhic debate, from the details of, particularly from halakhic writings of Rabbi Kook on this issue. Now, transparently, halakhah, Jewish law, refuses to talk or to be aware or to think in historical concepts. Maybe like law in general. This doesn't mean that history does not affect the development of halakhah. The philosophy of Rabbi Kook is well known. To many of us, it's well known in the academic writings. It's well appreciated in the Yeshiva world, or some of the Yeshiva world. His halakhic work is less known. But not only that his halakhic work is less known, but the ties between his halakhic work and his philosophy. This is what I want to show. Now, scholars have addressed this issue before, trying to show connections, tie influences between his ideas, his ideology, and his halakhic thinking. But I want to go into that a little deeper and develop some more sophisticated ideas about it. We know that Rabbi Kook was a Zionist. He supported the settlement of the lands in Israel. So that's why he was lenient on the sabbatical debate. But this is a little too shallow.
because later on, other issues are coming up. And Rabbi Kook is refusing to be lenient. Then, a decade later, after the big debate that he was first intervened, 1910, a decade later, in 1920, there was another big issue in the country about milking cows on Shabbat. Before that, they had in the country Arab cows, which you milk them once a day, wasn't an issue. They bought new cows, was a big issue. Many rabbis were willing to step ahead and try find some solution, how to milk cows on Shabbat. Rabbi Kook refused. He was the most extreme, he held at the most extreme opinion. Well, some scholars are claiming he wasn't really Zionist. He didn't really support the settlement. He was trying to hold in both worlds. Well, I think this is incorrect. And I want to show that we need, or I want to try and develop a more sophisticated attitude towards these ties, and explain why he was so much into developing lenient ideas towards the shmittah, while he was refusing to be lenient in other controversies. So, let's try to tell the story that stands behind the permit issued by Rabbi Kook, to unreveal the halakhic legal technicalities. I don't know if this is the right word to use, technicalities, but that he utilized, and understand their meta-halakhic significance and the cultural and ideological story that they tell. So let's start from the beginning. And this can go fast. We know it's an explicit precept in the Torah. So you work the land 6 years, and the 7th year you are exempt. It appears many times in the Torah. This is Leviticus. We saw the quotation from Exodus. Many ideas behind it. Actually fascinating idea. Sabbatical. A year that the person doesn't work, out of labor, can contribute his time to spirituality, can study, can learn. A year of equality. All the fruits that grow in the land, everyone, as we can see, can go into the land and take what he wants. And it really represents a fascinating society. A society that trusts in God, they're willing not to work 1 year. A society that is really struggling, aspiring for equality in the society. A society that people that show the importance of spirituality over working and so on. So this is fascinating. And it's especially fascinating if you take in account that it's coming together with some other precepts. For instance, the Jubilee year, which every 50 years, the lands go back to the original owners, kind of equality in between generations. Each generation starts over again with a fair share, with equality. It's a fascinating idea. But can it really come to reality? Can it really work? Have Jews ever were able to observe this precept? So the historical question is a big question. It's not so simple to answer. And it's probably very complicated. Depends when, what, where. If we look on this fascinating chapter from the book of Nehemiah, where the Jews returning to Zion after the first temple are taking a new covenant. And in this new covenant, they are preparing to take upon and observing the mitzvot of the Jewish precepts. And it's listed here only few precepts, which probably indicates what Jews thought are the most important ones. Shabbat, sabbatical year, mixed marriage. Those are the most important precepts, and this is what they are explicitly writing in their new covenant. but it also indicates to the fact that they are aware of the fact that during the first temple, they did not observe the sabbatical year. That's why they take in new covenant, saying, we will. It probably also indicates to the fact that they thought that it's doable. They can do that. And that's why they're putting it in the covenant. And actually, if we're looking into rabbinical literature, we figure out that probably Jews did observe the sabbatical year through the time of the Second Temple. We have evidence from the Greek and Roman law that Jews were exempt from paying taxes. So at the 7th year, so probably they did observe the sabbatical year. And when we go further in time to the 2nd century, especially after the revolt of Bar Kokhba, we see that the rabbis are struggling with it, probably because it became too difficult or maybe impossible. So Rav Kook, or Rabbi Kook, moved to the land at 1904. 1910, this is the 4th sabbatical year after the beginning of the Zionist enterprise. He is intervening in this debate for the first time. And what we find out is that this precept, this fascinating idea that we have in front of us, is under question whether it is doable or not, whether it's doable or not. Jews have learned to live with their precepts. Many precepts demands a serious sacrifice. Jews have learned to live with them, and from some even reap the benefit. Jews are observing the Shabbat, it demands sacrifice. Some other precepts that in the time became impossible, Jews or rabbis learned how to deal with them. We have many examples. Charging interest is one example. In early stages already it became impossible. The prohibition against interest, the rabbi dealt with it. The sabbatical year, Jews have not learned or did not learn how to live with it, but also rabbis didn't deal with it. For the simple reason that for 15 centuries, sabbatical year was not part of Jewish life. It wasn't part of Jewish life because Jews did not till the land at the land of Israel. Jews did not work the land at the land of Israel. So it wasn't in practice, it wasn't a valid precept. If it's not a valid precept, there are a few ways what to do with it. Some cultures, when you have a law that is not valid anymore, goes to the archive. Some cultures, when you have a law that is not valid anymore, like the Jewish culture, you keep studying it. You keep talking about it. Talking about a precept, it happened to be in Jewish tradition a way of observing a precept. Drosh v'kabel sachar. Talk about it. Study. You can gain some of the ideas, some of the ideals. You can gain by just studying it. So shmita, sabbatical year, was not a precept that was observed, but it was one that Jews have talked about it. And actually, it's not only that they talked about it, it quite became a symbol of a society for the coming days when we will be returned to Zion. What kind of a society we'll have? A society that desires for equality, spirituality, all the fascinating ideals that we have mentioned. So throughout the medieval ages, this is on, sabbatical year is on the table. Just talk about it. Just don't figure ways how to live according to it, because they don't. And here, at the end of the 19th century, this is the beginning of the Zionist enterprise. And the first sabbatical year, when this debate is beginning, 1880 1889, we have 7 agricultural settlements at the land of Israel. All are supported by Baron Rothschild, or are at the very beginning of them, not in a very great, in a great situation economically. And sabbatical year is coming. Now there is kind of agreement or understanding in those settlements that in the public domain, it will be all according to Jewish law. The settlers, not all are full observed Jews, but many of them are, and this is kind of disagreement, this understanding that public domain is according to Jewish law. So, here the sabbatical is coming. What are we going to do? Are we going to abandon the land? The whole enterprise will collapse. This at least is the claim. Maybe some historians say that Baron Rothschild had enough money to support them for the year. Maybe this is true, maybe this is not. But the rabbis that had to deal with it were convinced that the whole enterprise will collapse if everyone will have to just leave the land and don't work in the land. So what are we going to do? The settlers, whom could they go and ask and talk? They had the rabbis in Jerusalem, of course, but this was not relevant to talk to them. For the rabbis in Jerusalem, this whole enterprise was considered to be a sin, a wrong move. And for them, the fact that Jews in the settlement cannot live, cannot observe the sabbatical year, was another proof that this whole move is a wrong move. So what could they expect from those rabbis to tell them? Nothing. They had to refer to the rabbis in Poland, in Lithuania. And in 1888, a group of rabbis in Warsaw gathered and initiated a rule that Jews, the settlers at those 7 settlements, can sell the land to a non-Jew. And this way, they will be able to work at the land. So, if we like it or not, this is a well-known Jewish, way of dealing with some problems. Sell it to a non-Jew. Okay? Use the non-Jew. We have the non-Jew as a goy shel Shabbat. Now we have a goy shel shmita. But many in the settlements and all over were wondering, is this really what we want to do? Did we come back to the land in order to sell it back to a non-Jew? Did we buy the land from non-Jews in order to sell it back to them? And what happened to the ideas of the sabbatical year? How are we going to deal with it? It wasn't so easily accepted, not by the settlers and not by the Jewish world. But no other solution was offered, and this is what was done for 3 sabbaticals in a row. And then Rabbi Kook comes and intervenes in the debate. He moved to the land, as I said, 1904. 1910, it's the first sabbatical year that he is in the land. Now, of course, this problem of the sabbatical year is only the first problem. Soon enough, later on, many other issues came upon. And the Jews have realized that the myth that they believe in, that Jewish law, kulaba, has a solution that can conduct life in every field, has solution for everything. This is a myth. There's huge gaps within Jewish law. And those huge gaps are very well represented by the problem of the sabbatical year. Those gaps are all because coming from the same problem. Jews or halakhah, Jewish law, was developed now for centuries outside of the country, at the diaspora, where Jews are minority. And as minority, they can allow themselves develop a system, a legal system, that is good for minority, but cannot conduct the majority. And this is true at the level of the individual. Every Jew in Poland had someone, a non-Jew, to come into his house to put on the heating, but also at the communal level. Many areas of law, Jews did not have to take responsibility for. And that's why they did not develop law. They could rely on the majority. They did not have to develop laws of how to conduct war or how to run a medical school. It's a huge spectrum of problems which Jewish law never looked into them, many problems are coming up there when you look into them. But Jews trusted the majority, the society that they have lived in, that they can take care of those problems. So, let's look, as I said, carefully on the details of the halakhic debate, and of course I will not be able to touch all the complicated story, but I want to put the framework, the major questions, and from there to try and analyze and come to a conclusion why it is so important. Why did Rabbi Kook devote so much energy into that? And why it is still, as I said, on the headlines. So, the first halakhic questions is, does it really help? If a non-Jew owns a land at the land of Israel, so really, is it really true that the fruits has no sanctity? That's of course a major question, and it's basically the first question, because without a positive answer to this question, there's no reason to continue the discussion. Okay, and to promote this permit. The second question that came up was, are the laws of the shmittah, the sabbatical year in our times, are Torah laws, have the validity of biblical law, or in our times it's only rabbinic law? And I will explain why should we think that in our time it's in only rabbinic. But if we decide that it is a rabbinic law in our time, makes the whole discussion easier. Okay, at the second stage, there are two other questions, two additional questions. One, is it permissible, or is it a prohibition to sell the land to a non-Jew? Some rabbis claim that it's undoable, you're not allowed to. This is another prohibition to sell the land. The issue, as some of you know, is lo techonem, which I will explain. And the next question is, which may be most important, is this really a sale? Are we really selling the land, or this is only a fiction? And if it's fiction, why does it work according to halakhah? Of course, I will not go into all the details. I want to emphasize on some questions or some points of Rabbi Kook in each one of the questions that will lead us to the bigger picture, which I want to try and conclude. So first of all, the guiding principle that is leading Rabbi Kook throughout his discussion is this principle that we rely on the minority opinion. We maybe as lawyers we would say the dissent. We would rely on them in a case of emergency. So this is a Talmudic principle, but Rabbi Kook is using it in every step in his discussion. And what is this Talmudic principle about? As you know, the Talmud is preserving the Talmud is preserving the entire opinions. There is a discussion, there is one opinion, second opinion, third opinion. One opinion was adopted to be the law. The other two remained as part of our culture, as part of the book. They're not thrown out. We preserve them, we study them, we talk about them, although it's not the law. We not necessarily follow them. But the Talmud is saying that there is a principle that in a case of emergency, the rabbi, the authority, the legal authority, has a power, has a discretion. He is allowed, or maybe he must, he should, I would say retract. He should go to the lone opinion, to the minority opinion, to another opinion in order to solve a case of emergency. And if we look into Rabbi Kook's words, and this is the first time that we see Rabbi Kook's words in this discussion, he is saying that in any situation, right, such a difficult situation like that, it's a mitzvah, it's a precept to go into the minority opinion. And here we see it even more precisely, that his ideology, the support that he gives to the settlement in the land is already at the surface of his words. He really is saying that we should trust and follow minorities' opinions if we can. Okay, so will this help us? So I said the first question was, what's the normative status of shmita in our days? Is it biblical law or is it rabbinic law? Now, the idea that shmita, sabbatical year in our times, is rabbinic law and doesn't have a validity from the Torah is already said in the Talmud here by Rabbi Yehuda the priest. Rabbi Yehuda the priest, the end of the 2nd century, is found in the Talmud trying to initiate many leniencies to the shmita. Now, in the Middle Ages, in the discussion of Middle Ages and on shmita, his voice is not so much heard of. They don't need him in the Middle Ages. But at the 20th century, when Rabbi Kook is intervening in the debate, all of a sudden, the words of Rabbi, or the ideas of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, is coming up to the surface of the discussion. And he's bringing Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and telling us that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is, he claimed that in our days, shmita is only rabbinic law. And we'll go in a moment to try to explain why. Now, the interesting part, or the important part of the discussion is the fact that all of the rabbis agree to that, or most of them. Of course, Rabbi Kook supports that, but also the rabbis that oppose Rabbi Kook agree. Shmita in our days doesn't have the biblical power or biblical validity, but only rabbinic one. Where does it lead you to? The rabbis that are in the opposition to Rabbi Kook are claiming, well, we have a rabbinic prohibition to work in the land in the sabbatical year. And we have a biblical prohibition to sell the land to a non-Jew. So what are you, Rabbi Kook, is doing in this permit? You are balancing a lower prohibition, a rabbinic prohibition, against a Torah prohibition, and you prefer the lower one. You're suggesting to sell the land to a non-Jew and prohibit a Torah law in order to escape the rabbinic law. Does this make sense? Well, Rabbi Kook is also balancing prohibitions against each other. But he is balancing against the prohibition of the sabbatical year, he is balancing another prohibition. And he's saying as follows. Well, let me just skip one here. Yeah, okay. So this is the opposition to Rabbi Kook. They are telling him, you are preferring a rabbinic law against a Torah law, okay? And Rabbi Kook is saying, I'm also balancing laws against each other, but the law that I'm balancing against the sabbatical law is the precept to settle in the land. To me, this is also a Torah law, to settle in the land. So here we see already how the ideology of the rabbi is coming to the surface. What are we balancing against the law? What are we balancing against the law of the sabbatical year? Are we balancing the law to set the precept to settle in the land, like Rabbi Kook is suggesting, or are we balancing the prohibition against selling the land as his opposition is suggesting? So each one is bringing a different precept in order to balance one to each other, and this is already, of course, according to his ideology, and of course, we have to develop it more. But what is Rabbi Kook doing with the prohibition of lo techonem? Okay, he's balancing the precept of settling in the land, but still it's a prohibition to sell a land to a non-Jew in the land of Israel. You have to preserve the land within the lands of a non-Jew, of the Jewish people. So how is he dealing with it? So Rabbi Kook, what is he doing? He's saying the following. Do we have here? Okay, this is the Talmudic quotation that learned from the biblical verse that we have just seen, that you're not allowed to sell the land to a non-Jew. And Rabbi Kook is bringing many excuses. He's saying as follows. First, he says the reason for this prohibition is only to sell a land to idolaters. That's the prohibition. That's the Torah prohibition, to sell a land to an idolater. Now, Muslims, according to Maimonides, are not idolaters. So thank God we have the Muslims in Israel. We can sell them the land. It's not a Torah prohibition. Another suggestion he comes up with, you're not allowed to sell the land for the benefit of the non-Jew. But if you sell it for your own benefit, it's okay. Another solution, which is maybe the most interesting one, is he's saying, what does it mean if I need to go into the Hebrew word, lo techonem, and the rabbinic interpretation is don't give them chanaya, place to settle. So he's claiming and saying, what is place to settle? If you're selling it to someone that has already a place to settle, if you're selling it to a non-Jew that has already a piece of land in the land of Israel, so you don't give him a place to settle. He has already. So this is not a prohibition. So this is, I think, a beautiful example for us lawyers as for a formalistic interpretation. It's a very, all his suggestions are very formalistic suggestions. You look into the word, give him a place to settle. He has a place to settle. But this is a great example when a formalistic interpretation sometimes is used in order to achieve the real purpose of the law, the real meaning of the law. What is Rabbi Kook is saying here? He's saying as follows. What's the purpose of this law? The purpose of this law is to preserve the land at the hands of the Jewish people. In my time, he's saying, the best way, or the only way to preserve the land in the hand of the Jewish people is to sell it to a non-Jew. That's the only way. Because if we will not follow this permit, and will not be willing to sell the land, the enterprise will collapse. People will go back to Europe. Where will the land go to? to the non-Jews. So if you advocate this permit, so formalistically you sell the land, but really what you do is preserve the land at the hand of the Jewish people. So he is using the formalistic way of interpretation in order to achieve what he believes is the real goal of the purpose. Okay, so let's return to where we've been. The precept in our times is rabbinic. Now, why is that so? If Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Yehuda the priest, was right in the interpretation that he gave to the biblical verse that we've seen on the screen, that shmita is dependent on the Jubilee and is a valid law only when Jubilee is a valid law. And since Jubilee is not a valid law today, so also shmita is not a valid law. If he is right, so this law today is rabbinic law, so why did the rabbis go ahead and initiate this law? Why? It's not a valid law. It's not a valid law. End of the story. Why did the rabbis move ahead and reinitiate it as a law from their authority? The answer he is giving, it's because we want to remember our precepts. This is again a well-known concept in rabbinic thought. Remembering the law. So he's saying shmita in our time is commemoration. Now this, of course, leads him to one of his fascinating claims in the whole discussion. Well, he's saying the rabbis have initiated the precept in order to commemorate it. So finding ways to circumvent it, evasions, are also ways of commemorations. It's also something you do in order to commemorate. Look at that. Look what he's saying. Evasion, since it's carried out according to the prescriptions of the law, constitutes a commemoration of the precept. Well, we don't just disobey the law. We don't just don't observe it. We put a lot of effort in order to find ways to circumvent it. That's a way to observe a law. He's claiming. We said that learning is a way to observe the law. Okay, that's another way to observe the law. Okay. At my conclusion remarks, I will go back to that and I will try to point out why this is so important to me. Why this is so important. Okay, so let's go back to the discussion, and this is again claiming that evasion is a way of commemorating. And if we move on, we asked, is this sale really works? Is it works? Does fruits or the production of non-Jews don't have the sanctity? Will it help if we sell the land? So, of course, if we give a negative answer, we don't need to continue this talk. So it's obvious that Rabbi Kook is giving a positive answer. But, again, I'm bringing this point up because what he's saying here is fascinating. This question was first brought up in Tzfat in the 16th century. And as we know, on Tzfat in the 16th century was a very important school of rabbis. One of them was Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and many others. And in the 16th century, this is after the expulsion of Jews from Spain, the Jewish settlement in Tzfat grew up, many Jews moved there, and there was a huge discussion in Tzfat regarding this issue. Can we go out to the market and buy fruits from the non-Jews? And does these fruits have sanctity of the sabbatical year? Now, of course, we can go out and buy them. But the question whether the fruits have a sanctity of the sabbatical year has made difference to many other laws. So this was the debate. Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, took the position that the fruits of non-Jews do not have sanctity. So for Rabbi Kook, it's simple. He can rely on the Shulchan Aruch. He can rely on the author of the Shulchan Aruch. That's no one can blame him for not following the right way of halakhah, but still his claims are again fascinating. And let's look what he's doing. First of all, Rabbi Karo claimed that the sanctity of the land is given, or the fact that you have to abandon the land, it's due by men. If you own a land, you have to abandon it. Well, his opposition claimed that it's by law. If it's by law, so no matter who owns it, it has a sanctity. If it's by men, only if you own it and you declare, you give it, okay? So that was the position of Rabbi Karo. Now, Rabbi Kook is following Rabbi Karo, and again he is accused by the following. He's being attacked. What is your idea? You are trying to promote a Jewish settlement in the land of Israel. You are trying to promote a Jewish going back to the land, reviving the sanctity of the land, and so forth and so forth. And what are you doing? Again, you're selling the land to a non-Jew. You are trying to find ways to convince us that the sanctity of the land can be taken off by selling it to a non-Jew. So there is no sanctity to the land. So what have we done? Why did we come back? So this leads him to another interesting excuse or thinking or thought, which is saying there's a difference between the sanctity of the land and the sanctity of the commandment. Okay, there's kind of ontological sanctity to the land, which no matter who owns it. And there is sanctity of the commandments. We remove the sanctity of the commandment, the sanctity of the land is still on. Why is that so? And he writes, right? The sanctity of the land of Israel is a value unto itself, aside from the sanctity of the mitzvot. Now here, again, we are exposed to one of the innovations of Rabbi Kook, where he combines not only his ideology, which is of course here, but also he combines halakhah and agadah, which we could see that throughout the discussion. He takes the legendary idea, which is not a law, that settling in the land is more important than any other precept. He's taking the idea that the land has a sanctity unto itself, and he gives legal validity and takes it into the legal discussion. All those claims which were never before given a legal significance, and he gives this a legal significance. Okay, let's go back to the discussion in Sfat, 16th century. So we said that Rabbi Karo claimed that a land owned by non-Jew at the land of Israel does not have sanctity, because it's not by law, but by men. But here again, the interpretation of Rabbi Kook to this is again fascinating and important, and will lead us to the conclusion why this debate is so important. Rabbi Kook is trying to draw from that an historical consequences. He's claiming as follows. that Rabbi Karo had this idea not because he honestly or openly interpreted the sources, but because the situation, the need of the time forced him to take this decision. He said they voted in Tzfat. It wasn't Karo's interpretation or halakhic original thought. It was a change. It was a change taken by the rabbis in Tzfat in order to allow the people there to go ahead and, buy fruits in the market that do not have sanctity unto themselves. That's his claim. Now, of course, he didn't have to give this interpretation to Karo, and in the 400 years between Karo and Rabbi Kook, no one even had this idea to give an historical interpretation to Karo's move. No one said it ever before. Rabbi Kook is bringing it up, and this, of course, allows him to take the next step. If Rabbi Karo moved because of the needs of the time, I can also take the next step because of the needs of my time. And he's saying, right, the fact that he moved, I can do also the next move. Now, let's try for a second to look at the larger picture. At the end of 19th century, the orthodoxy of 18th century, we all know the slogan of Rabbi Sofer, the founding father of orthodoxy, Chadash Asur Min HaTorah. Innovations are not permitted. No innovations. And we all know that this is a step taken against the reform movement and all other things that were happening in Europe at the time. So of course, every rabbi at the beginning of the 20th century, end of 19th century, that is suggesting new moves in halakhah is fully aware of this problem. Is he allowed to promote novelties? Is he allowed to take a step that was never taken before? But orthodoxy of the 19th century had another slogan, which maybe is even more important to our discussion. Rabbi Sofer, the founding father of orthodoxy, one of his slogans was, innovations are not permitted. This is well known. But he had another slogan, which maybe is even more important. And the other slogan was, En achrayutam aleinu, which means we are not responsible for them. Who is them? What do you mean we are not responsible for them? We are not responsible for the Jews that are, revoked the yoke of the halakhah. We're not responsible. They're not part of our group. In what sense we are not responsible for them? In the sense that thinking of halakhah, claimed Khatam Sofer, I am as a legal authority, my horizon, which is my community that I see in front of myself. In front of myself, I see the community that observing my laws. And when taking decisions, I must take decisions that they will match their needs. I do not have to take decisions that will match the needs of those who do not observe the law anymore. Why should I? They don't care about it. They don't observe the law. Why should I observe the law for them? And according to Khatam Sofer, there are many examples where he said, okay, but according to what we used to think, Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh, we all for each other, in our times, we may be still all for each other in many perspectives, but we're not all for each other in the perspective when you think about halakhah. I'm not willing, Khatam Sofer claims, to give up certain law because of the needs of those who, in any case, don't observe the law. Now, what I want to claim is that these whole moves and steps that were taken by Rabbi Kook were actually claiming, and he was fully aware of what he is claiming, that those concepts of orthodoxy do not hold. We should change them, step out of them here at the land of Israel. He's actually taking a move against the basic concepts of orthodoxy. So first, of course, is the question of novelties. Can I make innovations? And he's saying, yes, I can make innovations. And he has historical examples. He brought Rabbi Yehuda the priest, as we saw, that was trying to make leniencies. And then he brings Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, with the kind of interpretation that he gives to Yosef Karo, and said he took a step, I'm taking a step. And look, listen to his words. No, did I go backwards or forwards? So, okay. He's asking, it was never used before. Am I allowed to take that? It's on his table. He's aware, and he's willing to deal with it. And he's saying, novelties, it's very common. Always were taken by halakhah. Not only that they were always taken, he's claiming here, but when necessary to do so, he's saying it's a mitzvah. I must do that. Why do I have to take those steps? So here he's saying, listen, agriculture in our times depends very much on exporting, on big markets. You can't just lose the markets once every 7 years. It's different. The times are different. We must take some steps, make some novelties. We have the power, we have the authority. But, listen to that. 10 years, a decade, before Rabbi Kook moved to the land of Israel, he wrote a little tshuva, a little respondo, regarding this debate, which was taking place at the land of Israel, and he was still living in Lithuania. And look how is he dealing with the same issue before he moved to the land. What is he saying? Why didn't they initiate this permit 2,000 years ago? Because Nebuch, 2,000 years ago, they did not have a Muslim in the land. They had only idolaters. Because they had only idolaters, they had no one to sell the land to. Now this is a typical way of making an innovation, but claiming I'm not making an innovation. I'm not making an innovation, it was there. They just couldn't find a non-Jew which is not idolater. That's the way, that's the classical way to deal with the problem, while he was still at Lithuania, thinking and writing and talking exactly in the way of classical orthodoxy in Lithuania. He was for the settlements, he supported them, he wanted to initiate some ideas, so he supported the permit that was initiated in Warsaw by other rabbis, but by claiming it's not an innovation. As we have seen in a few minutes ago, a decade or two later, when he's discussing the same topic at the land of Israel, he's talking in completely different vocabulary. He's not saying it's not an innovation. He's saying we have seen, of course it's an innovation. We have to make an innovation. We must make innovations. That's the essence of halakhah, making innovations. But this is only one slogan of Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy had another slogan. What was it? We are not responsible for it. Now, look at that. We are talking about the collapse of the settlements if they will observe the sabbatical year. But we forgot to add an important historical point. This was the claim in 1888, when there was 7 settlements. Rabbi Kook is moved to the land in 1904. He is issuing his permit in 1910. 1909. 1910. It's already the second aliyah. The settlements are big and completely different nature. Most of the settlers in 1910 are secular Jews, are socialists. They do not care about this permit. They will work the land in any case. For them, working the land is the ideal, not abandoning the land. For the settlers, and at 1910, they're coming to the land not only because of its holiness, but because working is their ideal. They want to go ahead and produce a new Jew, a working one, a productive one. So Rabbi Kook was attacked. For whom are you fighting? Why are you making this whole effort? They're not interested in your efforts. Why do we have to initiate a permit for those who are not interested in it? And this is a classical Orthodoxy claim. This is a classical Khatam Sofer's claim. Why does halakhah need to go ahead and make leniencies for people who are not interested in those leniencies? And this is a serious attack on Rabbi Kook. And actually, of course, he's aware of that. And what is he thinking? And the point I want to make is that this is exactly the main point of Rabbi Kook. Rabbi Kook is saying, well, you were not responsible for them in Lithuania, in Hungary. Maybe this was true. This is not the case here at the land. Here at the land, I am responsible for them. And whether they're interested, whether they are observing the law or not, is not at all relevant issue. Why? Why is that so? We have here a quotation from Maimonides. And Rabbi Kook was attacked by his opposition, mainly the rabbi of Tzfat at the time, telling him, look at that. The blessing that we have in our prayer, a daily prayer in our Shmona Esrei, against the minim, the heretic, was initiated by Rabban Gamliel in order to excommunicate those guys. And what are you doing, Rabbi Kook? You're taking the opposite move. Why do you care of them? Look what our forefather did in the 2nd century, the Tanaim. They had a completely opposite approach to you. Why do you have to initiate a permit for them? And he is responding. And this is what he is saying. You think that I'm working against the idea, but you have to realize that we are in a different times. And what are the different times? While I'm talking, you can read that. It's fascinating. We are not responsible for them, said the Khatam Sofer in Hungary. Who is them? Jews that revoke the yoke of law, of Jewish law. They are assimilating They're taking steps into assimilating into the surrounding society. Who is them today now in Israel? Who is the them? There are people, they are Jews that sacrificing their life in order to promote the future of the Jewish people. They're coming to build the Jewish homeland. Can you relate to them as assimilating, as you related to assimilating Jews in Europe a few decades ago? This is a completely different story. This is not an assimilating Jew. This is a fully committed Jew, but committed in a different way. So for me, he's part of my community. He wasn't part of the community in Hungary, maybe, for Khatam Sofer. Here at the land of Israel, he is part of my community. I'm responsible for him. Now, in what sense I'm responsible for him? I'm responsible for him in the sense of when I rewrite the law. He is part of my community. He doesn't care about it. I doesn't care about the fact that he doesn't care. For me, the only reason why Jews can observe the sabbatical year, says Rav Kook, today in the land of Israel will be because most Jews don't observe it. So we have started with a minority community. We're again a minority community. Now, a minority of observing Jews among majority of non-observing Jews. This is impossible for Rabbi Kook. For him, a law that can be valid, that can survive, only because most of the community do not observe the law, is not a law. It's not a law. Now, of course, depends which is your community. But if you take in account that you vision the whole the entire Jewish world, entire Jewish people that live in the land of Israel as your community, so you must design a law that everyone can observe. Assuming that all the Jews in 1910 at the Aliyah Shniya would observe the sabbatical year, what would happen? Everything will collapse. So it's not observable law. So I must change it. There's no difference if they want to observe it or they don't want to observe it. For me, as the authority, I have the responsibility to redesign the law for the new situation. And the new situation is not only settlements in the land of Israel. It's not only a new way of agriculture with markets and also and so forth. The new situation for him is the fact that we have a new concept of a Jew that he's taking into account. He has a new concept of a Jew that was never seen before. A Jew that is fully committed to Jewish life, but not to Jewish observance. This is a new concept. A national Jew. He's part of my community. And I have to design the law for him. If you remember the story that we have started with about the milking the cows, now he was refusing to be lenient. Why? He said, what's the problem with milking cows? There are many Arabs living in the land. They need to make living too. They'll be happy to come and work for you on Shabbat. So let them do it. Now, most of the settlers at his time will not do it. They will not want. Their idea was Jewish work. Okay. So you don't. So you don't observe the law. So you are sinners. But the law can be observed. If the entire Jewish community will decide to observe the Shabbat, it's doable. In every kibbutz, they'll have an Arab or two coming on Shabbat to work for them. It's fine. It's doable. The law doesn't need to be changed. The sabbatical year is not doable. That's why it needs to be changed. Now listen to this fascinating story. The rabbi of Tzfat, he's great opposition, strong opposition, which we just saw the letter, his response to the letter that he wrote to him. The Rabbi Yosfat wrote to him another letter, suggesting, you know what? He tells him, I read your writings and I see that you are claiming that you're really so sorry that we cannot observe the sabbatical year, and you wish for the days that we will be able to observe it, in a full way. So why not to do this following, let's take the following step together. Let's make a journey together, both of us, to Europe. And guess for what? Another Jewish way of dealing with problems. Collect money. Okay, let's go to Europe, collect money to support the settlers. And the sabbatical year, they'll not have to work. We'll bring money from Europe. Of course, right, if both of us we are known as opposition to each other, if we will come together, it will make a great impact, and Jews will open their pockets and they will give money. What's the response of Rabbi Kook? Rabbi Kook is saying, great, I'm coming. Under one condition. Before we go, you sign on my permit. Why? Why does he need his signature for the permit? Why does he need that? And if he signed, why to go? So, of course, the answer is simple according to that. Had they gone to Europe and were dramatically successful and come with a lot of money, there's no question that this support could not support the entire settlement. 1910, it's already a huge settlement. The money that they would collect can support part of it, if they will be successful. And of course, which part? The part of the Jews that want to observe the sabbatical year. The settlements of the religious Jews. What will be with the rest? The other rabbi is saying, it's not of my problem. En achrayutam alai, they're not part of my community. They don't want to observe the law, why should I initiate moves? Rabbi Kook is saying, no, I cannot make this difference. You want me to come with you to collect money for the religious settlements? Sign with me the permit for the non-religious settlements. That's only under this condition I am willing to come with you. So, well, just one point I want to make is, of course, the points that I've made on commemorating and the fact that evasions are also a way of commemorating. This, of course, placed Rabbi Kook in a great opposition to the reform movement. He was for innovations. He was against the ideas of orthodoxy, but of course against the ideas of the reform movement. He puts himself somewhere in the middle. And the great importance of this debate is this is the first step towards a split in orthodoxy in the beginning of 20th century into two main streams. What we call in Israel today the Haredim, the orthodoxy and religious Zionism. And the split is exactly on this issue. What are the boundaries of the community that the halakhic authority needs to see in front of him when he is initiating halakhah? Are we, the rabbis, are we, the halakhic people, should consider when we write the halakhah on the entire state and find solution? How can the entire state will be governed according to Jewish law, regardless the question if they want it or not? Rabbi Kook is claiming here, if we have a law that cannot be observed by the entire community, is not a law. And my community, contrary to the orthodoxy in Europe, is not observing Jews, but my community is committed Jews. And committed Jews are also Jews that come to the land and sacrifice themselves in order to build the future of the Jewish people. Now, you know, we Jews, you know, when we want to bless someone, give him blessing for, you know, good, long life, what do we say? Ad 120, right? May you have a long life of 120 years, right? This debate that was very strong in Israel this year, sabbatical year, and as I said, came to the Supreme Court, it was every day in the newspapers. This debate is celebrating this year 120 years anniversary. It started 1888 and now it's 2008. It's exactly 120 years. And it's not walking on a stick. It's full of passion. And the reason that it's full of passion after 120 years is because this issue of whether halakhah should consider the entire Jews in the country or not is at the heart, at the center of the dispute between the two streams of the religious people at the country. So if I go back to where we started, I just want to make sure that we have covered topics and we made sense of what didn't make sense at the beginning, that those three titles come together: Jewish law facing challenge of Jewish sovereignty, from classical orthodoxy to religious Zionism, halakhah, nationalism, and reimagining the community. This is exactly what happened. Rabbi Kook reimagined his community. He split it from classical orthodoxy to religious Zionism by reimagining the community. Now, as I said, the debate is celebrating his 120 years anniversary, and it's still full of passion. And I must admit that when I'm looking into this topic, I'm also full of passion. I think it's fascinating, so much into it. And I hope I was able to deliver some of this passion to you. And I thank you so much for being so kind of me.